In 1992, Michael Ondaatje won the Booker Prize for his novel, The English Patient. 8 years later, his highly anticipated new novel, Anil's Ghost, has arrived. Publishers Weekly says it may well be the capstone of his career. In his fourth novel, he draws from his homeland of Sri Lanka. Set in the mid-1980s, the title character, Anil, returns to her war-torn native land on a human rights assignment. She teams with a Sri Lankan archaeologist to uncover the murder of a man whose skeleton is found on government land. I am pleased to have him here to talk about this novel and also to talk about writing in general. Welcome back to the broadcast.
Thank you.
Last time you and I here, we were talking about The English Patient with...
Yeah, with Anthony.
Yes, with Anthony Minghella. Tell me why you wanted to write this story.
Well, I'd written a book about Sri Lanka, about my family in Sri Lanka about 15 years ago called Running in the Family. And it was kind of a lighthearted romp in some ways. But
Right.
the war carries on and seems to be never ending. And I just wanted to write about this this time in that country, but not in a kind of not politics on a larger level, not on the level of blaming people, just saying who's right and who's wrong, but to write about what it's like to live in a country like that, in that kind of state. So that was really the focus.
So you are writing here about a place more than you even write about character?
No, it is about character, but it's not about. I'm not writing a book to say this party is right and this party is wrong. It's more to do with
What violence does to you and all that?
yeah. You know, it's a country of fear. It's how do you cope with situations like this? Do you go into things like medicine? One of the characters, Gam, needs a
Right.
doctor, and he becomes manically involved with the work in the emergency wards. You know, so his whole private life disappears, but he embraces this kind of drama around him.
Some say he's the most interesting character in the book.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he is. He comes in about halfway, and all those characters come in halfway are always the most interesting.
Is that right?
Well, Kip happened in English Patient. He came in halfway, and
Yeah.
I thought, stole the show.
Did you really?
Yeah. Well, he was the one I got closest to. So in a way, you're writing with 2 or 3 characters, and suddenly somebody enters, and that's when the drama doubles for me.
But she is the interesting, I mean, she's the lead character.
She is.
You know, why choose a woman?
I just wanted to see what a woman would do in that very male world, I think. You know,
Who had left that world to come back as a
forensic specialist.
Yeah. And got involved in identification.
Right.
But she wanted to come back to look at human rights violations and other things.
Well, I mean, she comes back in a kind of grudging way. She comes back to the country that she was born in, but is now a complete stranger to. So she has to become re-educated into that country. And the archaeologist she's teamed with is the man who's sort of teaching her what the country has become and is warning her about her directness, her determination, which in the West can be a virtue, but in a place that's war-torn and politically tense could be quite dangerous. So, you know, that drama and debate goes on. How do you deal with a world where the politics is very dangerous around you? And when you're trying to find out, you know, the criminal in that situation.
It could be true in the Balkans. It could be true in a lot of places. How do you deal with...
I think that's also why I wanted to write this book now. It seemed, you know, although it's about Sri Lanka, it does seem to be about Central America and parts of Europe, and Rwanda, yeah. And, you know, it's such a kind of permanent story around us. And it's very difficult for us, the West, to kind of imagine being in that situation. You know, we see the headline, we see the photograph, and then it's replaced by another country. And so I just want to get in there and kind of have the reader in that landscape and talk about how people can become heroic in that situation and become, you know, worthy.
And this story, the search to identify Sailor, and how you figure out.
Well, you have all the kind of, you know, the drama of forensics and stuff like that, which is...
And is this a device for you, or does this have interest for you?
It is a device, but I also am fascinated by any kind of work. You know, when people are focused on a trade in any way, I find that fascinating. So whether it's a forensic specialist or an archaeologist or a doctor, that kind of how that career determines their personality. That's what interests me.
How that career determines a personality, or how the choice of that career is dictated by personality? Or...
No, I think it affects personality. You know, so the Kip in English Patient, for instance, being a sapper, being a bomb disposal person, has a character that is kind of created out of that kind of profession. The way you're You are in a way partly created by your profession, or I am as well. And
how is your personality? How does your career, writer?
Well, I'm someone who I'm alone most of the day, from about 9:30 till about 4 every day. That makes me kind of very self-sufficient. It makes me someone who needs to be alone and to work and to think alone. All those things are there. So that kind of does, in a way, govern how you live with other people, in a way.
There's no great romance going on here.
There's a lot of frustrated romance.
Yeah, but that's about the past and failure, right?
Well, I
or
think,
lost love.
I think one of the things that happens is that, in this book, which is really about people, the country separating, it's a country breaking up, by focusing on that element in the novel for so long, over 5 or 6 years, what happened was that everything in the book was about that. So that the love stories were about breakups. The attempted love story is sort of repressed. So it becomes a very celibate world in the middle of all this kind of tension.
You do that by flashback.
There's some flashback. We have a lot of Anil in America, a bit more of a raucous life there than it is in Sri Lanka, certainly.
You left Sri Lanka when you were what?
I was 11.
11, to go to school in London.
Yeah. And I've gone back a lot over the last, number of years. I go back usually every year if I can.
For how long?
About a month or two, usually, if I can.
What's the pull back for you other than just it is home?
Well, that's pretty big. It's a country I love, It's in spite of the fact that it's a tragic country, it's also a remarkable country, And one of the reasons I wanted to write about the archaeology in the book is that it's a very complex, intricate, ancient culture. It's not just a contemporary war zone. It has a huge history. That's fascinating, and I find that really interesting.
I would think that would be a great part about writing. I mean, you can decide, I want to know more about the archaeology. I want to know more. Mm-hmm. And so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to write about it.
Exactly.
I'm going to find out about it so that I can...
Well, I mean, that's the real pleasure of writing. It's like a free education in a way. You kind of go, okay, I'm interested in bridge building, I'm interested in bomb disposal, and so I can research that. I can go and talk to people who are doctors and working in emergency rooms and stuff like that. And
I have no pride in this question, but where are you in these characters? Where would I see you?
I think I'm in most of the characters there, I would say. I'm in Anil, I'm in Gamini.
Where are you in Anil?
Well, I'm the person who was born in Sri Lanka, and I'm going back.
Right, exactly.
I'm Gamini in a way because I'm a younger brother, and there's there are a few scenes in the book that I kind of drawn from my own childhood, I suppose.
With your older brother.
Yeah, but mostly about myself. There was a scene in the book where Gamini kind of tries to shoot out a flame on a candle with an air rifle, and gets help from his relatives, and that was something that came out of my childhood too.
There's also this is also like English Patient, in which you have two men in love with one woman.
It seems to be a constant problem.
A constant problem or a constant recurring theme?
A recurring theme. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, for you.
Yeah. Well, not for me, but I'm just that's the drama of writing fiction. You can't. One person in love with one woman is okay, but
two is more interesting.
It's
interesting. Yeah, she's trying to recapture what? I mean, this interesting woman is trying to recapture what?
I think she's there with a kind of determination to try and find a solution to a problem or a mystery, and I think she's obsessed with that. I mean, she's obsessed with that in a way that is a very Western determination. I mean, I think we like to think there are solutions to problems.
Exactly. That's an American thing.
It's an English thing too. And it's just, and I think in Asia there is a much more of an awareness of, there's this kind of shrug. Perhaps we have to live with it, and it's not something we want to live with, but we have to live with it.
Take a little thing like pouring freezing water on your body.
Okay.
Where does that come from? Just came to you in a moment?
Yeah, I mean, one kind of collects all these little bits from various
stories.
times.
Somebody tells you a story and you say, aha. Yeah. That'll reappear somewhere because I'll have a character who will be perfect for it.
Yeah, you don't want to put it away in a little notebook, but somehow, when you are writing this, and you are actually writing the story, the character builds itself in front of you. I don't model the characters on one specific person, but there's a kind of general form, and then all these other aspects and remembrances come in.
This book is partly about that, as you've already said. What happens to people in which death and conflict are an omnipresence in their life?
Well, in a way, a lot of the book is about how various people in the book try and deal with that.
Yeah.
I mean, Garmini is someone who embraces the chaos and the wards and sort of, you know, his whole private life disappears. Sarath, in a way, has also kind of retreated from the world and is hidden in some ways in ancient cultures. Anil is there unearthing things frantically, you know. There's an old archaeologist who's sort of retreated from the world. So there are lots of forms of
He's
retreat.
an interesting character.
Palipana, yeah, he's actually a lovely character. And
Where'd he come from? This is the guy who's going to help them figure out how they can identify the skeleton that looks almost unidentifiable.
Right. And he's an old teacher of the archaeologist Sarath. So they go to visit him, and he's this kind of cantankerous old guy, but he's also quite lovely, yeah. And he's looking after his niece, whose parents have been killed. And he's sort of a delight, and in spite of the fact that he's just accepting all this terror around him, you know, and he's inventing history.
Living in isolation.
Living in isolation, yeah. And there was a kind of archaeologist in Sri Lanka many years ago who did, in fact, at the last stage of his life, start, you know, turning things into fiction, and I just took that nugget.
And you knew about that how? Just through research, or just because you were Sri Lanka?
Well, so I talked to someone in Sri Lanka.
And they told you about this character?
Yeah.
See, that's what I love. I mean, that fascinates me about the, you know, somebody tells you about this guy.
And, you know, the thing is, you know, what's very interesting about when you're writing a novel is that the real stories around you that you discover are so remarkable. You know, who'd have thought that a major archaeologist could suddenly kind of slip into fiction at the last stage of his life? It's difficult to invent such a situation. So that's why, you know, basing a book on some reality and then taking it off from there is most interesting to me.
And what about Ananda?
Ananda is this guy who is an artist whose
Paints
job...
eyes on...
He's paid the eyes on the Buddha statues, and, you know, the statue is nothing until the eyes are painted, and then it becomes a god.
And that's how they're going to identify Sailor.
Well, that's his job. Then he helps identify the skull. He recreates the skull.
So it has
has a face. But, you know, the interesting thing about the eye painting is that the artist is never allowed to look into the eye directly when he's creating.
He always has to paint with it back to the eye.
Exactly.
Because it's unholy, or...
It's sacrilegious to a certain extent, you know, to be there in the actual creation of the god. So you are looking at it through a reflection.
You think this is your best book?
It was the most difficult book to write and most painful book to write, so I hope it is.
Why painful?
Well, you're dealing with a subject that's very, very difficult.
What, the ravages of war?
Yes, the ravages of war. It's also the ravages of a country which I'm very close to. So that was painful, but I probably is my best. I mean, it's, in a way, it was the book I was most focused on in some way, and found most difficult, so I hope that is the best.
You still edit Brick?
Yes, we do, yeah.
You and your wife, right?
Yeah. And it...
you live in Canada now?
We live in Canada, and it comes out 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay, congratulations on this. It's a great story, and people are raising interesting questions, and it takes you on a journey to a place you may not have ever been, and tells you a story about ancient culture as well as a contemporary culture set in terms of people trying to live, you know, with the constant fear of events around them, you know, and they see horrifying violence. One day you see young kids, and the next day you see heads on stakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's some hope, hopefully.
There's hope. Where's the hope?
I think the hope is strangely in the characters. You know, that the people in the story are people who are, you know, gracious and in the end very honorable. I think that's where all hope lies.
I do too. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
From the author of The English Patient, Michael Ondaatje, Anil's Ghost. We'll be right back. Stay with us.